So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steena Nasapen Watson. I'm the Sustainable Sewerage Manager at Northumbrian Water. And really, my presentation will build on what Emily and Darren have already covered to show how at Northumbrian Water we are using the collaborative platform that the LLA offers in essence to plan for the future and deliver schemes. So again, it's interesting going last in a series of presentation because I feel that Darren and Emily have already mentioned quite a lot of what I'm going to talk about. So hopefully I'll put additional touches to what has already been discussed. So I will touch on the NIDP, which is the Northumbria Integrated Drainage Partnership, which I would really say it is something that really complements and is a vehicle for delivery for a lot of the aspirations of the Blue-Green Declaration, as well as the LLA vision that Emily and Darren have talked about. I'm also going to touch about applying the right mindset and ethos, essentially to deliver a number of successful schemes, such as Killingworth and Long Benton and Brunton Park in the Newcastle region. I think it's fair for me to also sort of put the context of what Northumbrian Water wants to do in the future and touch very briefly on our business plan and really sort of illustrate how blue-green infrastructure is important to us and how we plan to address that in our next AMP7 cycle. I'm pretty sure that quite a lot of you would have heard of the Drainage and Wastewater Management Plan. If not, I will touch very briefly on it and again talk a little bit about how the Newcastle LLA has been a very, very important platform to potentially look at how we're going to deliver the drainage and wastewater management and pull all of those opportunities together before finishing off on some reflections really and perhaps where we need to go from here. So as Emily touched on previously, essentially we are very keen as a risk management authority to look at ways of managing flood risk. We also look at when we seek to improve our resilience to flood events really, and in order to do that, we've been quite, I would say, lucky, but also quite in some ways in an avant-garde position where we've managed to bring together a number of partners to form the NIDP. And essentially the NIDP is a partnership made up of the water company ourselves at Northumbrian Water, the Environment Agency, so that's the local North East Environment Agency, and 14 lead local authorities that share our operating areas. And what the NIDP seeks to achieve really is bring together all of those parties that I've mentioned to look forward in terms of planning better against a number of sources of risk, of flood risk across the Northeast. It also aims to complement existing practices, which essentially, I mean, I'm going to refer back to Emily, where Emily mentioned that one of the barriers that we are very conscious of is around the socio-political and the governance aspect. And in order to overcome that, the NIDP was set up essentially to get rid of some of those barriers and to complement what already was there and make the best of those approaches. And in a lot of sense, there are a lot of parallels that are drawn with the work and the conversations that we have in the LLA to get rid of some barriers. There's also that need to balance reactive short term. A lot of the risk management authorities need to respond to a very short term need around flood risk management and engagement with the communities, but also the ability to plan forward and be able to sort of scan the horizon and look for those opportunities, and also engage with the right parties in order to find those opportunities that will make things work in the future. So the NIDP really sort of gives us this vehicle, I would say, that enables quite a lot of work and the aspirations that we have, both as part of the declaration, but also as part of the LLA, to really put blue-green infrastructure in the midst of a plethora of solutions by offering quite a strategic risk prioritization and looking at all of those opportunities, which obviously work when we are talking to that many partners. So just very quickly, just explaining the process of the NIDP. Essentially, it's a simple process where we look at 5 parameters that are common to all of the risk management authorities. We condense those regional issues, and then we put that through a risk-based prioritization approach. And what it does, it spurts out a program of high-risk areas. So essentially, we've got already a 10-year program with a number of high-risk locations where we would like to investigate further to understand the interaction of flood risk. So what that does, that gives us this program. We can then make the most of the different sort of investment plans and the existing funding mechanisms to then jointly go forward and fund some studies to look further into those areas. And I think I'm going to pause here to sort of draw a little bit of a parallel with a lot of the conversations that we have within the LLA as well, where we've got this wider range of stakeholders. And essentially, through the LLA, we are able to then seek a number of opportunities happening in a lot of the areas that we've identified through this prioritization approach. And those conversations are really enabled, and those opportunities are, I would say, fleshed out a little bit. There's been some really good examples where we've engaged with partners that are, I would say, outside of the core group of the NIDP to make things happen. We've had a lot of success around combining engagement activities as well, just by being in the same room as some of those stakeholders in an LLA meeting. So we've, as a company, as a water company, we have taken a lot of benefits out of the LLA. I think it's one of those platforms that I would agree with both Emily and Darren that we need to put a little bit more of a structure and be clearer about the expectations. But I would certainly say from a water industry perspective, the LLA has helped in brokering and really getting us a number of conversations that would otherwise not happen. So I just wanted to touch on the right mindset really, and just explain a little bit of this journey that Northumbrian Water has been on. I'm not gonna go through the detail of the fund, the first state where around in the middle of the screen there, where you can see this cloud with the lightning bolts. I think it was. I think it's fair to say that Emily and Darren already talked about it, and it was the catalyst which really propels a number of organizations, at least in the Northeast, to think a little bit differently about how we were working, because up to that point, really, although having a number of strategies and having the Floodwater Management Act telling us how we should work, I think we were still working in silos for a number of reasons, and really for the first day of the Toon Monsoon really propels us into action and gave us a little bit of an aperçu, I would say, of how things could be in the future, how surface water runoff and extreme events like what we experienced in June 2012, how much damage that could do. So looking a little bit forward, as a result, the NIDP was very much created. I think it's fair to point out that we are an award-winning partnership that we're very proud of. And also, as Emily already mentioned, the LLA was also born out of that event. We certainly, as a water company, we were conscious of always being very quite reactive in our approach to dealing with flooding, and therefore started thinking a little bit more proactively, looking into the future about how we could do things. And the two schemes which I will refer to, that are both that Darren would have had an input in, would be Brunton Park and Killingworth and Long Benton. So, for example, Brunton Park, Newcastle City Council, the Environment Agency, and ourselves at Northumbrian Water, we all knew we had an issue with flood risk there. We had our communities suffering from different sources of flood risk. We were each trying to do what we thought we could do, but really not very successfully. And not until we came together and talked about what we could do collectively, we managed to implement a very sustainable approach to managing that flood risk, which now looks absolutely great and delivers not only a flood risk function, but biodiversity, and also looks at the water quality of that runoff back into the river. So all in all, a very successful scheme. The other one being Killingworth and Long Benton, which I understand phase 3 is nearly completed now, which is again hopefully an award-winning project where we've done quite a lot of work both to the main rivers and working again across the differently local flood authorities, both North Tyneside Council and Newcastle City Council, but also with the Environment Agency, and having a very much an integrated approach in by delivering a multi-million scheme that have got multiple benefits. Looking into the future a little bit, so building on the good work that we've already done and looking into the future, we're very conscious that there are challenges on the horizon, and at Northumbrian Water we're very keen on innovation. We hold an innovation festival every year where really we are keen to tackle very big questions and invite our stakeholders and our partners to very much work with us to come up with some solutions and answer those big questions. I think that's where the LLA potentially has got a very crucial place in bringing those different disciplines and those different expertise together, and looking into the future by really changing some of the behaviors and getting in the space of how do we deal with changing behaviors around a number of other issues, such as raising awareness of wet wipes, etc., because there are a number of factors that actually contribute to flood risk, not just stormwater management as we know it. So it certainly feels quite an interesting space to be in, and hopefully that's where we would be looking at, where the LLE and our other partners can really help, as well as academia as well. So just moving on to our core business plan. So again, so Northumbrian Water submitted a business plan in September of 2018 to Ofwat, our regulator, and most of you will be aware that actually we got our final determination yesterday on the 16th of December. We had 6 key themes through our business plan. The one that I particularly want to refer to here is the provision of reliable and resilient services, and that's where we really feel that stormwater management as a whole is very relevant to the provision of a reliable wastewater service, but also the ability to be resilient to changes in the future. So we are busy going through what the final determination results are, and I think it's fair to say that there are some challenges that we have with funding, and it'd be very interesting to work even harder with our partners to make sure that a lot of the aspirations that we have are still honoured, and we still work collectively to deliver some of those regional and partnering aspirations, I would say. So leading on to very much the drainage and wastewater management plan. So for those who already know what the drainage and wastewater management plan is and what it's trying to achieve, again, you will be very aware that the essentially looking at the whole drainage network, and then ultimately taking again stormwater through the drainage network to a treatment plant to be then discharged back into the environment. We need to be very aware, and we need to think quite creatively and innovatively about how we cope with the future challenges such as climate change, urban creep, infiltration, and growth, and what those stresses might mean to the drainage and wastewater network as a whole. So the drainage and wastewater management plan, in essence, was a key recommendation of the 21st Century Drainage Programme. It aims to very much mimic what the Water Resources Management Plan does for water, but then bring that to a wastewater platform. With drainage is, I think, it's a little bit more complicated, and I'm sure a lot of you will agree with that. It's a bit more open, and there's a number of stakeholders involved in the drainage, as we call the drainage family, and it will be very important to manage the expectations of all the stakeholders in the production of a DWMP. Just as a note as well, the DWMP will be statutory not at this first pass in 2022, but it will be statutory in 2027. They will run as a 5-year cycle, and the intention of the Drainage and Wastewater Management Plan is essentially for candidates to be agreed collectively and co-created and co-delivered, of which then those options will make their way towards individual business plan, whether that's a business plan from the water industry or any medium-term plan or different other funding plans, as we know as well. So again, I think the LLA served to be a great platform. We had a meeting back in our offices sometime last year when the DWMP framework was announced. We really we used the LLA to explain what the DWMP expectations were. We had a great discussion around how the different expertise and the different viewpoints and the stakeholders in the LLA, in the Newcastle LLA, would be able to complement that process. Mostly specifically, around how we could build on existing practices and build on existing tools. Emily touched on a number of work packages through the Urban Flood Resilience Project, which are very, very complementary to what we're trying to do in the DWMP. So again, having those innovative work packages and having the right expertise there to help water companies to deliver the DWMP is a great approach. So again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but there's a number of things there. Obviously, PR19, the price review, Ofwat price review methodology really builds on the DWMP. There's the introduction of a 1 in 50-year resilience metric as well, and we're very conscious in order to satisfy this resilience ambition, it would be unsustainable to go and build bigger pipes. And really we need to turn our attention to how best to manage stormwater in a different manner, and also the benefits of stormwater management. So there are other things, as again you probably be aware, Sewers for Adoption 8, better known now as the Design Construction Guidance, which obviously puts another very interesting sort of management of suds classed as sewers, so that essentially the water industry can then adopt those, so taking away a lot of the barriers that were previously mentioned around adoption and maintenance of suds features. Northumbrian Water, has always been quite a very keen and active participant of the Blue Green Cities Pledge, and again, we were one of the signatories earlier this year. We also do quite a lot of work through our developer services team with our local planning authorities, Forever Horizon scanning, and Darren mentioned one of the schemes that we're currently looking at on the Calder's site. So being able to have those conversations, but also the ability to join dots to then create an opportunity is something that's very relevant to the different teams that we have, but also the LLA offers that platform. We earlier in the year had a developer conference in March. Very much we've now got a developer experience measure that we're going to be measured on. And we've got a bit of a league table. So again, that's the opportunity to influence developers to come along this journey with us, to talk around those opportunities that we can sense and we can put together. So really finishing off, the LLA, the Newcastle LLA, has got a very much a very local context. So does the NIDP, and I would say the NIDP very much sort of complements is the vehicle that we can make things happen, but the LLA is potentially the platform where those wider stakeholders and the opportunities can be sensed. It also has an international context, I would say. So Northumbrian Water was successful to provide the only UK case study for an ISO on stormwater management by drawing on the good learnings from Brunton Park and Killingworth and Long Benton. That ISO is currently, I think, going through a few reviews, but will shortly be available for anybody who wants to have a look at it. So obviously we've managed to build on what's happened through the good work that we've done in Newcastle, and a lot of the conversation that we've had through the LLA, but also elevate that as a UK case study, which I think is a great thing, really. We talk about blue-green. Darren and I were having a chat last week around talking about water-sensitive cities. Darren's touched on the greening of spaces there. I know Manchester is really leading the way in terms of trees for cities, but we've got some great opportunities here in Newcastle, and it's trying to understand really when's the right time, who are the right people to engage to make those opportunities happen, really. I think it's fair to say that when we talk about a lot of the things that we need to do, although we are predominantly talking about flood risk management and flood resilience here, typically the water industry, Northumbrian Water, has got a bit of a wider remit because we look at stormwater management in essence, which then, actually it's just about management of water, because it's management of water and the upper catchment to then provide a good water supply, but also how we then deal with excess water on our network that doesn't then cause us too much problems, and then we can return that back to the environment in a way. So it's really important for us as a water company to be able to understand how we manage that water in a circular movement, really. And we've got a great opportunity through one of the performance commitment that we've got, which is called the Improving the Wider Environment. I've already touched on the circular economy. I think as we go forward through the LLA, and this is going to get a little bit more relevant, is trying to understand how we can manage the expectations of everyone while the different things that we do. And I think I'd like to probably say that it is not a static approach. There are a number of things happening there, and we continuously need to evolve to keep it to be relevant to whatever's happening. So we've done quite a lot of work with Syria, with Stantec around the best tool about looking at different capitals and this concept of a circular economy, which I think will become again very relevant to a lot of the conversations within the LLA. And just very quickly to mention, and Darren already mentioned it before, those very quite challenging targets around carbon neutrality. We've got we've made a pledge that we're going to make all of our operations carbon neutral by 2027, but also that we're going to have zero avoidable waste by 2025. So some challenging things coming ahead, and it would be great to sort of not only look back and see how the great things that we've done through the LLA, but also look forward to potentially see what other challenges are on the horizon and how the LLA can help us with addressing some and tackling some of those challenges, which really brings me to the end of my presentation. So thank you very much for your attention.
Great, thank you, Steena. Really good presentation, giving another perspective on how Learning Action Alliance can help with business for a water company.